Maybe I'll use this. Yep, we're going to use this over here on this bar, and that's where we're going to be. So, as I have been saying to you guys, I have not been giving y'all the full shaboing boing bang bang when it came down to Miss Jane. Okay, now Miss Jane, we will say no names in the chat. I said this on Friday. No names in the chat. But when I tell you that Miss Jane came in here and she turned this sucker up just a little bit, oh baby, she turned this sucker up a little bit. Because I know for a fact that people have been saying we don't see the RICO, we don't see the RICO, but baby, that RICO has been showing. Let me tell y'all, RICO has been peaking like his name was Rico Suave since the first day of testimony, okay? Let me just go ahead and let me tell y'all that. But people have not been wanting to hear that. Well, now here we are, and it is the close of week 4 of the Diddy trial, and we are seeing the pattern. Dun, dun, dun. Because there are a lot of parallels. People have been saying it's just the same testimony that Cassie gave all over again. Well, guess what? It is the same testimony that Cassie gave all over again with a little bit of a spin. However, there's a little twist to this story because, okay, we don't call them freak offs anymore. We call them hotel nights. We don't have the elements and components of there being a music career there, but there is still the promise of things that were giving and afforded to. I have too many mods over here. Yeah, I need y'all at the main bar. There have been a lot of promises that were afforded to her, just like there were promises afforded to Cassie. So we're going to get into some of those similarities, but I know y'all want to hear about the mistrial. Dun, dun, dun. All right, so let's go ahead. If you are over here on the main bar, then you know that we are going to get ready to pull up some court docs onto the screen, and that is exactly what is happening right now. If you are here over here at this bar, then you are going to see, well, you're going to hear, you ain't going to see, you going to hear about this court doc that's coming up right now. Because y'all know how I do. I don't just tell y'all about things. I show y'all what I am talking about. So this right here is an email that has come in from the defense team where they are accusing prosecutorial misconduct on behalf of the government and perjury on behalf of Brianna Bongolian. All right. So we're going to get ready to get into this. Y'all stay tuned because I'm going to read this to y'all. If you are over here, y'all are going to read along with me. Let me get my screen, how I like my screen. Nope, that's not it. Bam. And let's get into it. All right. So this was submitted to Judge Arun Submarian. I believe that is how you say his name, on the 7th, which is today. Okay. This was submitted and filed today. All right. It says that the defense is reaching out to the judge and they are respectfully submitting this because they are saying that there was an introduction of perjury. Okay. They're saying that basically, as explained below, in this trial, the government has presented testimony that it knew or should have known was materially false related to its allegations that Mr. Combe dangled Brianna Bongolian over the balcony of Cassie Ventura's apartment in September of 2016. Accordingly, to avoid an unfair conviction in this case, the court should grant a mistrial. Dun, dun, dun. Now, the reason why they're saying that she gave misinformation is because when Brianna submitted her photograph of the bruise on the back of her leg, the date that it had on there was September 16th, I believe it was, or September 26th. Let me see. Let me see. 26th. So it had metadata on there that was dated for September 26, 2016 on there. And as the defense began drilling and hammering, they discovered that, well, we discovered that Diddy was on the East Coast performing with Little Kim in Jersey. And the next day, he and Cassie were in Harlem. So they're saying that Brianna was lying about the testimony of being hung over the balcony. But there was a whole text message that was submitted between Cassie and KK. Now, I don't have that transcript with that testimony on it. I'm working on getting that as we speak. Should that come in while we are live, you know that I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to play it, honey, because that's what I do. That is what I do. All right. So I don't have it at this moment. What I can tell you is after Brianna testified in court and she had been dismissed from the witness stand, when we came back into the courtroom, they did submit text messages where Cassie was saying, I just found out some crazy ish. All right. She says, this is exactly what it says verbatim. I'm going to be reading it from the actual document because it's saying that the government started by eliciting testimony from Miss Ventura about the allegations that cannot be true. Miss Ventura said she actually saw Mr. Combs holding Miss Bongolian over the balcony railing. Okay, and then they quote the testimony. I saw him bring her back over the railing of the balcony, then throw her into the patio furniture. Okay, yet the prosecutors knew she had not actually seen what she described because they had in their possession a text conversation demonstrating that Miss Ventura was told about the allegations, the alleged incident, by another unidentified person. Okay, and this is where they go into the text messages between Cassie and KK, right? In Cassie's text messages, she says to KK, hey, I just found out some crazy shit. I'm just finding out right now. So they go on to say, nonetheless, they allowed Miss Ventura to continue to insist on cross. She had witnessed this incident, okay? Question. This is what they were asking her. And you testified that you saw him throw her onto the patio furniture, right? Cassie, yep. He brought her back over the balcony and threw her down. She persisted in this story even after she was confronted by the text messages. Question, isn't it true that you learned about the incident on the balcony after fact? Cassie, I saw what I saw, so I don't know. Question, was the government in your preparation for your testimony in this case? Have they gone over this text message with you? Cassie said, not this one, no. Okay, so now the defense goes on to say, thus the government left the jury with the false impression that Miss Ventura saw Mr. Combs dangle her friend over the balcony, that this made her fearful of him, when in fact, if there was any incident, Ventura merely heard about it afterwards, considerably lessening any probative value as to her state of mind. Can you guys hear me over here okay? I know you guys can hear me okay. Henny glasses in the chat if the sound is good. Let me see something. That's like really bright. I guess we'll do like a blue light. I don't know, because I don't like that bright ass light. Okay, sound is good over there. Okay, what about y'all over here? Sound is good over here? Sound is good over here? Okay, everybody's saying the sound is good. All right. So, next, the government doubled down their presenting perjured testimony. Okay, they're saying that Brianna perjured herself and that it was intended to corroborate Cassie's false testimony. Okay, Brianna claimed that Diddy lifted her up and held her feet on the balcony railing, and that this caused injuries to the back of her leg, her back, and her neck pain. Now, she said when he slammed her into the patio furniture, that's what it was that caused those injuries to the back of her leg, her back, and her neck. Was her being slammed down into the patio furniture. But tomato, either way. Hey, that's what I said. What's up, brother? They're trying to say that she's lying about that, okay? So Brianna was very definitive about these injuries, and particularly the bruise on the back of her leg, which was one of the details that stuck out in her mind. So they go into the question and answer about all of this, where Westmoreland asked her, where did you go after you left Cassie's apartment? Brianna says she went to her apartment. Westmoreland says, what did you do at your apartment? Brianna says, I was shaking a lot, and then I wanted to take a shower because I felt disgusted. And then I looked over behind my leg and I seen a huge bruise. Let me just pause right there. Again, we're going to go back to the testimony that has been given about how much illegal substances they were all taking. And it's not just Brianna. It's not just Cassie. Diddy was taking a lot of substances, illegal substances back then as well. So it's very much, she did also testify that she wasn't sure about the date, okay? What she had was a picture of the bruise, and the way that bruise looked, it didn't look like it was something that had happened that exact day, because you know how a bruise bruises in steps. First, you get the point of impact, then hours later, you start to see the bruising. By the next couple of days afterwards is when you start actually seeing that the bruise begins to take form, take color, take shape, all of that. All right, so I believe that this incident happened a couple of days before that, but because of all of the use of the substances that they had been using, that it is possible that it did not happen on the 26th. That just happened to be the day that she took the picture. And she knows that this incident happened, so she's saying that it happened that day, but it probably happened on the 22nd or the 23rd, because Diddy was out here on the East Coast on the 26th. Anyway, Westmoreland says, well, we'll talk about the bruise. Well, I think it wasn't her, but I think it was the government that was asking her about the bruise. So I stand corrected. She says, we'll talk about the bruise in just a moment. Miss Mongolian, do you remember all the details of the incident of that night? Brianna says no. She doesn't remember all the details of that night. She's admitting that on the stand. I don't remember all of the details, right? So then they go on and ask her and say, do the details that you have talked about stuck out in your mind? She says, yes. Question, what, if any, physical injuries did you have as a result of that night? Brianna, I had that big bruise was like a piercing in the middle of it, and then I had back and neck pain. This is what she testified to under oath. She said, I can't remember everything, but I remember that. And I think somebody dangling you over a railing of a 17-floor balcony would be something that would hella stick out in your mind, no matter how high you were, and you being then pulled back over the rail and slammed down into the patio furniture. You're gonna remember that as well. You're gonna remember every detail of that. You may not remember what happened, what you ate for dinner that night or breakfast that morning. You may not remember all of the chains of events, but you're gonna remember being dangled over a damn balcony. So now this is one of the reasons why the defense team is calling for a mistrial. Okay, this is why, because they're saying she's lying. She's lying about all of this, Your Honor, and we want a mistrial right now. Not now, but right now. Okay, so it says the government next introduced photographs of the injury of Miss Mongolian supposedly sustained at the hands of Diddy. Okay, a photo depicting a leg injury taken on September 26, 2016 at 9:45 a.m. Brianna testified that she took the photo of her leg injury around the time indicated in the exhibit, that she did so the same day as the incident, and that she got the injury, okay? And she got it from being thrown into the balcony furniture. On cross, she confirmed that the balcony incident happened early in the morning, that the photo of the leg bruise was taken later that day, and that the injuries to the back of her leg happened on the same day. The government then introduced photographs of the injuries supposedly sustained at the hands of Diddy during the incident. The government knew, or should have known, this testimony was perjured, and that Miss Mongolian could not possibly have been injured by Diddy allegedly on a Los Angeles balcony in the early morning hours of September 26th, or even the day before that. The government has long known that Mr. Combs was on the East Coast in late September, and specifically at around the time of this alleged incident. The government knew that he had stayed at Trump Plaza in New York City between September 24th through the 29th, okay? In fact, the government marked one of the hotel records into evidence. Now, pause, because here's the other thing. Most people book their flights ahead of time. True? True. And they fly in and they go in the afternoon, the evening, or the late night hours. True? True. We've also heard about assistants traveling ahead of time to set up the rooms. True? True. So who's to say that just because this room was booked on the 24th that he was actually there on the 24th? And if he was going with Cassie, isn't it possible and plausible? Thank you for the cheers. That was so cute. Isn't it possible and plausible that his assistants were in that room on the 24th? I'm just saying. Anyway, let's continue. Let's continue, okay? And it has, okay, mark the SNL, and it had the evidence in its possession. All right. What's more, when the defense began to expose the perjury on cross-examination, the government repeatedly attempted to disrupt the cross with unfounded objections and requests for sidebars and unfounded claims, such as that proper leading questions meant defense counsel was testifying. Then, despite having elicited Ventura's false testimony about having directly witnessed the alleged incident, the government persuaded the court to admit the hearsay text messages with KK, describing that Cassie had found out from someone else, despite having elicited perjurious testimony from Ventura claiming that she saw the alleged conduct. All of this was highly improper and exacerbated the harm caused by subpoenaing the perjured testimony, okay? It bears emphasis that the use of the perjured testimony regarding the balcony incident is just one example of prosecutorial misconduct during the trial. The defense previously moved for a mistrial based on the improper line of questioning related to the 2012 destruction of fingerprints provided by Scott Muscuddy to LAPD. As the court will recall, the defense argued that the government's motive in eliciting the testimony was to create an unfounded and highly prejudicial inference that Diddy somehow had corruptedly arranged for the destruction of the fingerprints. The government claims that it was not the purpose of its questions, and the court denied the motion and instead gave a narrow limiting instruction. Now let's pause there for a second, because during that testimony, what happened was they said, the fingerprint cards were brought into. The door was opened for that. Okay, that's how we're the door was opened for the government to walk through when they mentioned to Kid Cudi, oh, by the way, did you keep up with the investigation of the attempted bombing of your vehicle? So he was like, yeah, I reached out to them a couple of times. The defense asked him, well, did you know about the fingerprints and the DNA? Did you know that the DNA came back that it belonged to a female? No further questions. They opened the door for that. So now when the government gets the arson investigator, Mr. Jimenez, up there on the stand for testimony on what his expert experience was with this particular incident, firefighter Jimenez said, well, I didn't get to find out what happened with all of that because, and I'm paraphrasing, I can pull the transcript to read it, but I'm paraphrasing. He said the fingerprint cards were destroyed, okay? And this was not normal practice. And that somebody from the LAPD had to have destroyed it. Matter of fact, let's roll that beautiful bean footage, shall we? Okay, I'm going to pause in the summary chart and go over the issue concerning DNA testing. Questions for Officer Jimenez. Okay, they talked about that. Hold on. Hold on, I'm pulling up the DNA for y'all. Okay, and the whole thing is the defense had wanted to bring up the DNA first. Okay, so we're going to talk about all of this, but I want to get right to the testimony of Jimenez. Okay, I will flag for that, the court, in addition to the DNA testing. Hold on. Jimenez. Arson. Okay, hold on, you guys, because we're getting to it. Oh, baby. Because I don't want to misquote it. We worked in pairs. We went through basic training. Because we got the court docs. Y'all should know Henny got the docs. Through fire damage. Have you looked recently? We're almost there. Hold on one second. I'm almost there. Long driveway. Okay. Let's see if I put this in now. All right, let me pull this up on this screen. If you are over here in this live, you're not going to see it. But if you're here on this live, you will most definitely see it. All right, so let's pull this down. Let's stop that one. And let's go ahead and let's pull up the other one. I'm a little rusty because I haven't been doing these in a minute like this. But we got it. Boom. Transcript time. Let's read what they had to say. All right, so it says... So he was asked, what sort of testing did you request? Officer Jimenez, trace analysis to identify what the liquid was, right? Question, did you personally perform the trace analysis? Jimenez, no. Question, do you have any training in trace testing or analysis? Jimenez, no. And it was Slavic, so I'm going to say Slavic, okay? Slavic, what were the results of the trace testing? Jimenez, the reports came back that it was, in fact, gasoline that was inside of that old bottle. Slavic, turning now to fingerprints. Did you request that fingerprints be taken in this case? Jimenez, I requested, yes. I believe 1 and 4, maybe 3. I don't recall if 3 were requested, but we did request fingerprints and the bottle, on the bottle and the lighter. Slavic, the bottle and the lighter, you said. Did you request fingerprinting of any other items at the crime scene? Jimenez, I did make a call to LAPD, Latent Prints Lab, to have them come and fingerprint the vehicle itself. Slavic, that was the Porsche. Jimenez, a Porsche, yes. Slavic, did you personally take the fingerprints? Jimenez, I did not. Slavic, who did? Jimenez, I don't know. I wasn't present for that collection. Slavic, was it someone from your unit? Jimenez, no. Slavic, arson investigator? Jimenez, no. It was somebody from LAPD. Slavic, is that standard protocol? Jimenez, yes. Slavic, have you received any training with respect to fingerprint analysis? Jimenez, not analysis, no. Slavic, were fingerprints recovered from the glass bottle or the Bic lighter? Jimenez, I have no idea, to be honest. I never received any reports. He never received any reports years later. Put a pin in that one right there, okay? Slavic, were fingerprints recovered from the Porsche? Jimenez, I believe there was 2 prints recovered. I don't know the results of that. Slavic, do you You don't know the results? Jimenez, no. Slavic, did you collect any other fingerprints in this case? Jimenez, the victim had informed me that he had somebody come and print his house from a previous trespass, and that person recovered 2 fingerprints on a glass front door, and that someone put those on print cards and turned them over to me. Slavic, what did you do after obtaining the print cards? Jimenez, the print cards were sealed in an envelope with the person's signature, and then I put them in another envelope and I sealed for evidence and turned them into LAPD for print analysis. Slavic, what do you mean by putting them in evidence? Jimenez, we take all of our evidence we collect and we turn it over. We book everything with LAPD's evidence units, and they store and collect all the evidence, and it's properly maintained through LAPD. Slavic, did you receive results related to those fingerprint cards? Jimenez, I did not. Slavic, now you said that you entered these fingerprint cards into evidence. Did there come a time when you learned what happened to the print cards? Jimenez, yes, recently. Slavic, what happened to the print cards? Jimenez, 2 print cards I had turned in were destroyed. Slavic, when were they destroyed? Jimenez, they were destroyed in August of 2012. Slavic, were you aware that they were destroyed in August of 2012? Jimenez, I was not. Slavic, did you authorize the print cards to be destroyed? Jimenez, I did not. Slavic, who ordered the destruction? Jimenez, someone within LAPD. Slavic, is that typically the way that the logged evidence is destroyed? Jimenez, not for evidence that I turn in. I'm the lead investigator, so everything goes through me before it's destroyed, unless it goes through our arson section. It will come through in a request if they want it destroyed or not, or returned back to the owner. Slavic, and LAPD and the LAPD who employee who authorized the destruction wasn't you said, right? Jimenez, no. Slavic, was that person a member of your team? Jimenez, no. Slavic, did this strike you as unusual? Agnifilo, I'm going to object to all of this. Now, pause. 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 What in that questioning implicated Diddy? Ready, go. Y'all answer. Spotlight on y'all. Do, 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 do. I need my Jeopardy sound. All right, Kristen said, if I'd like to know who signed off on it, because there's your mole. Upstairs ain't the same when the fella's not here. I don't know where the fellas are. Sharm, where you at? Nino Black, where you at? None of this says to me that it was indicating that it was going towards Diddy. Anyway, the objection was sustained, okay? He said, the judge asked, there was a question pending. I take it there is an objection to that question. Agnifilo says yes, the court says sustained. So he held it, okay? Slavic, I'll ask a different question, Your Honor. Slavic, Investigator Jimenez, in your 15 years approximately as an arson investigator, has evidence been ordered destroyed by someone who was not a member of your team? Agnifilo, Your Honor, I object. And can we have a sidebar? The judge, you may. Now this be the quiet, this be the tea. This be the henny tea. All right, listen. So Judge Arun says, do you have any more questions along these lines? So Slavic says, no, that's my last question. So Judge Arun says, well, the objection to the question, which I take it there is an objection, is sustained. Agnifilo, well, Slavic, Your Honor, this is an item of evidence that he collected with respect to his investigation. I think he's entitled to explain to the jury what happened with respect to those evidentiary items. Judge Arun, Well, if we're going to be asked, it would need to be rephrased. So he told her she got to rephrase the question. The way the question was posed was whether in his 15 years of experience, there's been evidence that has been destroyed by someone who is not within his chain of authority. Something along those lines. Slavic, that's right. Judge Arun. Well, in that instance, you are in that instant, well, in what instance are you talking about? How would he know if evidence was destroyed if there was never any follow-up to determine whether any evidence was destroyed? And you're talking about the destruction of evidence when it's not within the chain of authority. So how would he know about the one way or the other? So Slavic says, I can ask in a way that frames it within his knowledge. Understood. So Judge Arun says, but let me hear. So Agnifilo says there's a larger issue. There's an inference of wrongdoing here, which we are hearing for the first time, and which is utterly unfounded. They're clearly saying that something happened to cause these fingerprint cards to be destroyed suspiciously under circumstances that this witness has never seen before. Well, that's what he's already said. He's already said this is not usually how fingerprints get destroyed. And had the defense never opened their mouth and said anything about fingerprint cards and DNA, female DNA, you would have never opened the door for this. Anyway, Agnifilo continues, and I'm asking that this entire line be struck as being prejudicial. They're clearly suggesting that Mr. Combs, with his authority, did something to cause the destruction of these print cards. There is no other reason for these questions other than that. Nothing that I heard implicated him, but I guess they're taking it as an implication because of the fact that this goes to the Kid Cudi thing, okay? So the Judge Arun says, I, for one, hearing the testimony, did not think that's where the government was going. The judge didn't even hear it that way. But here they are saying that that's what they're hearing. No one mentioned Diddy anywhere. No one asked, does Mr. Combs have, and has he ever donated to, and da-da-da-da-da-da. Nobody's saying that. So Agnifilo says, I don't know where else. So the court says, let me hear Ms. Slavic. So Ms. Slavic says, this is what respect to his investigation. And this material was in the 3500, okay? Investigator Jimenez only recently learned of the destruction of these fingerprint cards in this matter. He learned of destruction as of Friday. So this was from 2012, and here we are in 2025, and he's just now learning that the fingerprint cards have mysteriously disappeared. So now Judge Arun says, but what's the inference? What are you trying to address? Slavic said, it goes to the completion of the investigation. I think the defense is going to get up on cross-examination and suggest that it was a dead-end investigation. There was no charges. There are reasons why. And this destruction of print cards is one such reason. Agnifilo says they could have left that at that. That's clearly not what they're doing. What they're clearly doing is saying in addition. They could have just said, where are the print cards? They're destroyed. They didn't have to go further and say, have you ever heard of this before? Did you authorize it? This is clearly improper, and that's what they're doing. They are putting in front of this jury that there was wrongdoing in the LAPD, and the only reason that would be relevant, since this is not a LAPD internal investigation, is that someone in this courtroom had something to do with it, and that someone is Mr. Combs. This is not what I'm hearing. This is not what I'm hearing. Fingerprints yield DNA, big boy. Fingerprints yield DNA. And they brought up the fingerprints and they brought up the DNA. I was in the court. So Slavic says, Your Honor. So Judge Arun says, hold on. Again, that's not how I would have taken it. I understand the questions as they are coming in as drawing the sting from potential cross-examination that would show that the destruction of the fingerprint cards is reason to question the entirety of the investigation to the arson incident. And I assume that that's what Ms. Slavic was doing, was trying to anticipate that you're going to get up and say what you're talking about. You lost evidence that would show, possibly point to someone else having done things and just mysteriously vanished before trial. Agnifilo, then she should have waited for me to do that. And the last question is improper along those same lines. Judge Arun says the last question is going to be rephrased. So Miss Shapiro, I don't know where Miss Shapiro comes from, but she's over there in the sidebar too. She says that was the only reason they asked the last question. There's no other legitimate reason consistent with their explanation. So Mr. Agnifilo, he says, Agnifilo says it shows the motive all along. The motive, first of all, I wasn't going to bring up the print cards. So Judge Arun says you can. I don't think you're going to hear anything in response because there's nothing to elicit. So Agnifilo says, but then they should have done this on redirect. They did this not for that reason. They did this to suggest something improper happened and that it's not just an LAPD matter because they wouldn't have asked all the other questions. In 15 years, have you ever heard of it's suspicious? They're making it suspicious. No, it's hella suspicious that it's already suspicious. Anyway, so Slavic says, Your Honor, we discussed this yesterday with the defense, raising the DNA testing issue with the testing results coming into play and defense going to call into question the investigation and the lack of charges in this crime. I think, as I flagged for the court, we plan to, and so Judge Arun says it was not flagged for the court. So Slavic says, I remember flagging for the court that the government will ask questions regarding the DNA testing and gas testing and the fingerprint testing. So Judge Arun says, yes, those questions were asked and there was no objections that were raised. This is a separate issue as I'm understanding. So Agnifilo says this is a separate issue. So Slavic says, I think we're entitled to draw this. So the court said, well, do you have any further questions other than this line? So Slavic says no. Well, yes, I have further questions, but not related to this line of inquiry. So Agnifilo says, my request is that all of the questions and answers in regard to this witness being asked, in 15 years, you've never heard such a thing. You didn't authorize this to be done. He's getting ready to try to strike it from the record, y'all. So Judge Arun says 15-year thing hasn't been answered. So Agnifilo says, okay, that you didn't authorize this to be done. So Slavic says, I think he's absolutely entitled. Agnifilo says, my request is that it be stricken. So Judge Arun says, I need a second to look at the transcript. So he's looking, he says, for the jury, give us 1 second to sync up our technology here. Since we've been going for a while, why don't we have a restroom recess? I'm sure everyone will appreciate it so people aren't just pulling their heels here. All right. So they go on to a break. They come back. And so, after 10 minutes, he says, Investigator Jimenez will be back. He tells him that, blah, 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 blah. All right. So at the end of the day, you see that this has been the issue about all of this. They didn't want her asking or insinuating, in their words, that Diddy had anything to do with the fingerprint cards coming up missing. But wait, there's more. I'm not finished reading this. We're going to get back into this letter. Let me get the letter back up on the screen. So now that you're up to date and up to speed with what we're talking about as far as the letter. See, this is why it's good to have these transcripts, because you see how I was able to just go to the transcript and pull for y'all the sidebar conversation, because when we're in that courtroom, it doesn't matter if you're in the main courtroom or the overflow courtroom. When they ask for a sidebar, you don't hear what they're saying. But when you get the transcripts, you're able to hear, because the stenographer is still taking notes on everything that's being said at the sidebar. So we could talk about it later when we get the transcripts. You feel me? All right. So Now we're back into here and we're talking about the destruction of fingerprints provided by Scott Muscati. And he wasn't provided by Scott Muscati. That's a misprint right there. It wasn't given to the LAPD from Kid Cudi. It was given to LAPD from the LAFD, Fire Department. So anyway, they go on to say that the testimony was to create an unfounded and highly prejudicial inference that Mr. Combs somehow had corruptly arranged for the destruction of the fingerprints. The government claimed that was not the purpose of its questions, and the court denied the motion and instead gave a narrow limiting instruction. And did. Now, they go on to say, however, it became apparent shortly thereafter during the testimony of Mia the very next day that, in fact, the government's motive all along must have been to suggest that Mr. Combs had corrupt influence over the LA authorities. Now, y'all probably don't remember this, but I believe I did bring this to y'all because I was giving y'all what was happening, the play-by-play and blow-by-blow of what was happening in the courthouse, honey. And I told y'all, Mia testified to a speeding ticket. That one time she was speeding, and she told the cop where she worked at, who she worked for. She got Diddy on the phone, and the cop let her go. Then another time she was speeding, and she had Diddy in the car. And when the cop saw that Diddy was in the car, he's like, oh, it's Diddy, you know, no speeding ticket. So now they're trying to tie all of this together. Listen to this, y'all. LA authorities, when it tried to create the impression that he was responsible for the destruction of the fingerprints. Specifically, the government elicited testimony from Mia about 2 incidents in which the LAPD did not issue a speeding ticket after she was pulled over because the officers found out she worked for Mr. Combs. In one case, Mia got pulled over speeding, name dropped that her boss was Diddy, and got him on the phone, after which the officer was saying like, oh my God, Puff Daddy, I love you. Like, just went into this whole very excited conversation, and then she was let go. The second time, Diddy was in the car, and once they saw him, they were like, oh my bad, yeah, and left them alone. The prosecutor took special care to emphasize that these incidents occurred in Los Angeles. Question: what city did these interactions with the police occur in? Mia, in Los Angeles. Question: these incidents in isolation seem like benign examples of police giving lenient treatment to popular famous people, which they do. Coupled with the sinister implications of the fingerprint destruction, however, they create a strong implication that the reason Mia, and as the government will surely argue over alleged victims, didn't go to the police because of Mr. Combs's corrupt influence over the police, and that the and the LAPD in particular. In other words, the subsequent questioning of Mia, even if itself permissible, further corroborates that the government's real purpose in its questioning of the fire inspector Lance Jimenez was to improperly suggest that Mr. Combs corruptly caused the destruction of the fingerprints. This constitutes another instance for prosecutorial misconduct. Accordingly, the court should grant a mistrial based on prosecutorial misconduct. Signed, Alexandra A.E. Shapiro. Say what? You really trying to file for a mistrial? Now, let me tell y'all something. This is not the first time that they have attempted to go for a mistrial at all. Brian Steele has tried for a mistrial, and they have tried for prosecutorial misconduct, okay? They have tried to get information struck from the record. They have been playing these games. Well, I won't say games, but this seems to be their game. Now, we're going to go into here because this is... Okay, here we go. This is where they tried to call for a mistrial, okay, after the whole testimony of Mr. Muscuddy, okay, and the fingerprints and when they were destroyed and all of that, okay? And Judge Arun was not having it. They asked for a mistrial. Your Honor, I understand that, but my point is that it was becoming clearer and clearer that this inference is what the government was doing, okay? The judge allowed them to talk, allowed them to get their point out, and the judge said the application for mistrial is denied for the reasons stated by the government. No mistrial for you. So that's one time. The next time they tried to go for a mistrial, hold on. It's scanning. There was another time they tried to go for a mistrial. Brian Steele tried to get a mistrial. They tried to strike Dr. Dawn Hughes' testimony, her whole testimony for the record, from the record. They've tried to get Lance Jimenez's testimony. Right here, Brian Steele, okay? He says, Your Honor, I'm going to move for a mistrial. The government knows that the answer is about to be that Mr. Combs has had other people unalive. This is outrageous. So they said he didn't say that. Steele says, but you will hear him say that. Steele says, well, he's about to say it. I'm putting the court on notice. So Judge Arun says, no, you don't get to put me on notice. There's no grounds for any kind of application along those lines because no question that you are talking about has been asked and the answer has not been given. Now, what is your objection with the question? So Mr. Steele says, why are you scared of Mr. Combs? And his answer is going to be because Mr. Combs is violent and he has other people unalive. So Judge Arun says his understanding of these things that had happened and his understanding of events is not a 404A issue, which is what is being raised, okay? So he asked him again what the objection is, but the judge denies Brian Steele's request for a mistrial because once again, he's asking for a mistrial from when Kid Cudi was there. Wait a minute, so that's two. I could have swore there was a more recent one because that's two. One for the fire investigator, one during Kid Cudi. Hold on, because we going to find it. Hold on. Oh, that's what he was on. So it's that. All right. That's all I'm seeing. Okay. So that's two mistrials and a move to strike Dr. Dawn Hughes' testimony. Like, at the end of the day, what are we doing? They keep trying to get things thrown out. What you said, yeah, there was another. I'm trying to think. I could have thought that. I could have sworn there was another one too. I can't think of who it was. I think this might have been the fourth mistrial that they called for. If I'm being honest with y'all, I think this might be the fourth time. I'm not sure. I'll do some digging and figure that out. But this is about the third, fourth time that they asked for a mistrial. For prosecutorial misconduct. But now they're also saying under the grounds of perjury. And it's just like, are we for real right now? Is this what we really doing? Now, I'm going to tell y'all like this, all right? For those people who are saying that they don't see any of the case that is happening, there is very much a case that is being presented to us. Whether you choose to see it or you don't understand it, I don't know. Oh, y'all like my hair? Y'all like my hair? I got a little peanut head. I like my hair. Thank you. Listen, I'm down there. It was hot on Friday. I couldn't have all of that hair on my neck. I had to take that hair up off my neck, child. It was hot. Okay. And then I'm very funny about my hair because locks hold odor. So when I found my scalp was sweating, I said, Absolute 72. You want me to explain? You want me to explain? Let me take a sip of my water. Racketeering. We all should know what racketeering is. Racketeering refers to engaging in a pattern of criminal acts as part of an ongoing enterprise under RICO, okay? There's a criminal enterprise, and the defendant is associated with or employed by or is the head of said enterprise. And the defendant, Diddy, must have committed at least 2 predicate acts of racketeering. At least 2. Are you still here? You still with me? Absolute 72. You still here? Let me know if you still here. All right? And these acts are related and continuous and show a pattern. Now, I am so glad that you asked me about this, okay? Because there is a pattern of behavior. When it comes down to both Cassie and Jane Doe, the reason you are hearing similar chains of events that have gone down is because they have now established a pattern. And while the incident that happened with Cassie took place back in 2008, 2009, 2012, 14, 16, whenever it took place and it started, it did not end until 2018. 2018 is within a 10-year scope. So I'm going to entertain you, darling. And let's see, because you're saying to pull up Cornell. I've already pulled up legal documents, but let's see. This is what he wanted me to pull up. And it's still going to back up what I'm saying regardless. So it is what it is. But let's pull it up. Let's pull it up. Let's pull it up. This what you wanted me to pull up? This right here? Because you didn't even let me finish what I was saying. That's fine, because in all honesty, I really need the people over here instead of here. I mean, if we're going to be real about the situation, I really need people over here. So since he wants me to read this, let's read this, okay? RICO imposes a maximum. Okay, well, let's go up here. The Racketeering, Influence, and Corruption Organization Act, RICO, is a federal law, okay, targeting organized crime actively, and racketeering. RICO enhances existing criminal punishments and creates new causes of actions or acts done as part of an organized crime enterprise, which is what I just said. Which is what I just said. Why do I have, I'm reading racketeering right now. Okay. It talks about how it's a maximum of okay, since you want to go into, that's what I was already talking about, but you said you wanted me to pull this up as if it was going to change what I was about to say. Okay. At the end of the day, him using his money from his legitimate businesses to pay for hotel rooms, to wire money to his assistants, for them to go purchase, where are we at? I can say it now, drugs. Him using his employees, his legitimate employees, to help cover up his criminal activities. Okay? That's all. Using his jet, his business jet. What do you want from me? Profit is not always key. This man. You know what? I'm going to do you one better. Oh. Why don't you go there? Let's see if they actually show you the predicate offenses of a RICO. Okay, so while I'm doing that, why don't you tell me the 35 predicate offenses of a RICO? What constitutes a RICO? Tell me that. Because you're trying to challenge me and refute me and rebut me. Give me the 35 predicate offenses of a RICO. Give me that. Yeah, I did spell that right. Can you do that? No, because I was in the middle of talking and you interrupted what I was saying. All right. So this is what you wanted me to look up, right? Now you give me the 35 predicate offenses of a RICO. But that's what racketeering is. He's under a RICO. Where's the 35 predicate offenses of the RICO? There's acts that must be established. But I'll wait. What are the 35 predicate offenses of the RICO? I'm waiting because while you trying to prove a point, I'm about to really show you. I know what I'm talking about. You can't tell me what they are? Because actually, while you're looking at that definition for RICO, did you know that there are 35 offenses, predicate offenses, that can be used to establish a pattern of RICO activity? Not just the profit part. Not just the profit part. There are 35 predicate offenses that can be used to establish a pattern of racketeering behavior. But you're acting like you know something that you don't know, and you're challenging me because you've heard something somewhere else, and now you're coming over here. Look, T Love is giving them to you because T Love did the work. See, if you won't come over here, we could talk about it. No, Prophet does not have, you're going off of that, but there are 35 predicate. What part of that? Does everybody understand what I'm saying? RICO defines, racketeering is one portion of it, but it actually defines 35 predicate offenses that can be used to establish a pattern of racketeering activity. Period. And the predicate offenses are what we're looking at when it comes down to this whole case with Diddy. But people don't want to see that. And I'm up for a debate. I'm up for a good debate. But when you come in and it's like you trying to challenge me, and I know what I'm talking about, I'm going to put you to the mat. No, they do. Extortion is for profit or gain. Profit or gain. And guess what? There was a gain. For him, there was a gain each time he did something. So let's go through this, okay? Because now this opens the door for what I was just talking about, how there is a pattern of behavior that has been established between the testimonies of Cassie and the testimonies of Jane and everybody in between. The reason why we were having so many people coming in and testifying when it came down to Cassie is the thing that you must understand is Cassie was in a decades-long relationship with Diddy. That means that she has spanned over 10 years, and over 10 years being publicly his girlfriend. Privately, they were doing these freak-offs. And everybody knew about the abuse. Abuse is also used as a form of coercion. There is also something within the 35 predicate offenses of a RICO that is called God, it's where they are committing violence in the continuing violent crimes in aid of racketeering. That's what that could be considered. The 35 predicate offenses of a RICO. I'm going to give them to y'all. If y'all are new here, here we go. Murder is one. We have not heard anything coming up about any unaliving, so please don't bring any of that other stuff into it because that's not what he is on trial for. Kidnapping. There was the kidnapping of Capricorn Clark twice. They can consider in the Intercontinental video when he came and he put hands, feet, and knee bows on her and tried to drag her back to the room, that could be attempted kidnapping. But also those times when she was taken against her will to hotels and held there because she had bruising on her that needed to be hidden until they actually went away. That's where the kidnapping comes into play. Arson, allegedly, and I'm saying alleged because yes, I can admit that we haven't had any concrete anything that says that he did it, but we have speculation. So the alleged arson of Kid Cudi's vehicle, that's another one that they can look at. Bribery, you have the security guard from the Intercontinental Hotel coming in to testify that he was paid $100,000 to make that video disappear and give Diddy the only copy. That is bribery. That is also obstruction of justice. That could also be tampering with witnesses. Okay? Behaviors. Dealing in an obscene matter. That's where these freak-offs and these hotel nights come into play. Both Cassie and Jane have testified to these sexual requests that he has made of them to sleep with multiple men and the things that have gone on in there. Both Cassie and Jane have testified to having multiple UTIs. The fact that he did not like them using condoms with strangers who were escorts. But the obscene manner is the fact that, and there's three questions that establish the Miller test. A Miller test must be taken in order for a matter to be considered obscene. In the Miller test, 3 of those questions, if people are asked them, I've already asked these questions before about the Miller test. If it fails the Miller test, then it is an obscene matter. The Miller test questions basically ask you if this is for literary, scientific, or artistic matters. It's not. It asks you if this, let me pull up the Miller test for y'all. Okay. Appeals to prudent interest, all right? This means that the material taken as a whole would appeal to an average person applying contemporary community standards with an excessive or unhealthy interest in sex or, that is not normal sex that people engage in. So guess what? There you go right there. It's sexual conduct that functions in an explicit and a offensive way. That's 2. And it is not for literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. That's 3. It fails the Miller test. That becomes an obscene manner, which is another one of the predicate offenses of a RICO. Shall I proceed? Yes, indeed. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Okay? Dealing in controlled substances. Him traveling and trafficking illegal narcotics across state lines and out the country is drug trafficking. People seem to fail to realize that you do not have to sell the drugs for it to be trafficking. There's something that people do that are from New York that they don't even realize that is illegal every day. There are people that get into vehicles and leave the state of New York and drive into Connecticut, drive into New Jersey. You have now crossed state lines, and you could have Mary Jane in your car. You have now trafficked across state lines. It don't have to be for sale, for profit. That's trafficking. That's trafficking. So him bringing the E and the Molly and the GHB and the ketamine and the cocaine and the marijuana from LA to New York to Florida to Turks to the Bahamas, that's trafficking. Okay? Moving a human body from New York to LA, from LA to Florida, from Florida to Las Vegas, from Las Vegas to New York, from New York to Turks and Caicos, from Turks and Caicos to south of France, from south of France to the Bahamas. That's human trafficking when you start bringing people around that are engaging in prostitution. Sex trafficking. When you move an escort from Atlanta to LA, Atlanta to Florida, Atlanta to New York, and there is cash exchanged for sex, and that's what has been established, that is sex trafficking. Because now you are moving someone purposely to engage in sex. That is transportation with the intent of prostitution. Wire fraud is another one. Where did the wire fraud come in at? Well, George Kaplan testified to wires being sent from Combs Global to Western Union, him picking up the Western Union, him going and purchasing drugs, him taking those drugs to Diddy. That's wire frauding. Him having monies wired from Cassie's mom, $20,000 from Cassie's mom, wired to his account for blackmail, for a blackmail payment. The obstruction of justice comes in when he's paying people and having people come to clean up behind him, okay? And the pattern only requires 2 offenses within 10 years. It's still racketeering without Cassie's mom. There is still a profit to be gained from him. Whether it's monetary or not, it is a profit to be gained from that. It's benefiting him. See, that's where the enterprise comes into play at. You got these assistants. Okay, let's break it down with the enterprise. You've got KK. KK is involved in every portion of thing that has happened that was illegal. KK has booked hotel rooms for these freak-offs and these hotel nights. KK has had Jane traffic substances from LA to Miami for Diddy. KK had a hand in that. KK was involved in the bribing of the security guard. She reached out to Eddie Garcia. She put Diddy on the phone with him. She was present when all of this, taking pictures of driver's license and signing NDAs on Combs Enterprise letterhead. KK was present for all of that. KK knew about all of the coercion that was happening and the violent acts. That was his right hand. KK was also a legitimate employee of every business that Diddy has had. She's been an employee of, basically. The security guards were a part of this as well. Delivering drugs, transporting people, covering things up. Domestic violence is still a crime regardless to how people feel, and domestic violence is also considered coercion. In many states, they are beginning to look at it as coercion. They were part of the conspiracy and cover-up of all of this stuff that's been going on because they all had, the assistants. The assistants were purchasing drugs for him as well, cleaning up after the escorts left out of the rooms. Spying and keeping tabs on Cassie and all types of stuff. Some of these things that they were doing, you may not consider to be enterprise worthy, but if they all say the same thing, that they understood their job to be to protect Diddy at all costs, that's where they're going with this. And like I was saying, when Cassie testified to those 10 years of being with Diddy, all those people that came and testified after her are all of the assistants that were around when she was around. Everybody corroborated what she said. There may have been alterations in people's perspectives of what happened, but the names never changed. KK, D-Rock, Roger Bonds, Uncle Paulie, Ruben, never changed. Never changed. These sexual acts are obscene matters. And guess what? I guarantee you, I would not be surprised if that doesn't end up being one of the predicate offenses that the jury ends up looking at. Because people keep saying that's that man's bedroom, that's that man's personal life. But obscene matters is a RICO predicate offense. It's a predicate offense of the RICO. Now, that's you stuck up on this profit thing and you're not even looking at what was just said to you about the patterns of behaviors that constitute a RICO. It ain't just about that. There's also forced labor. His freaking assistants working 24/7, 7 days a week, 365. They can't go home. They can't go to sleep. And now, if you want to bring into the fold how people are saying that Cassie and Jane, that they were sex workers because Diddy was paying for their whole life. Diddy's paying Jane's house rental, the rent for her house. Diddy was funding Cassie's whole life. And they was freaking off to get it. And they didn't want to be doing these things, but they had to do these things in order to keep what they had going. These people didn't want to lose their jobs because they were being blackballed. They watched what happened to other people. We listened to Mia talk about how when Capricorn Clark got fired and another girl got fired for talking about what was going on between Diddy and Cassie, how they told her she was going to have to go and testify. Capricorn Clark broke down into tears because she's got an autistic son and she can't get a job nowhere because she's blackballed. What does that mean? He has to come back. She had the only place she could go. Why did you keep going back to Diddy? Why did you keep going back to work for him? Because she had nowhere else to work. Nowhere else to work. You can stick to for profit. And guess what? If those are the two that you're sticking to, then you have just established two for a RICO. You've just established two for a RICO by your own argument. You've established two. The transportation for purposes of prostitution, the Mann Act. That is in Cassie's testimony, and that is what has been coming up in Jane's testimony as well. Transportation for the purpose of prostitution is there. Because these girls have been shuttled around to have these freak-offs in different places, okay? Sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion is established. Jane Doe was moved around and her home was threatened if she didn't want to do these freak-offs no more. Her exact words were not, I don't want to be with you anymore. I don't want to deal with you anymore. Her words were in her text message that she opened a Pandora's box, a door that she could not close. Now she feels like that's the only reason that he kept her around. And now she feels like she has to keep going or else she's going to lose the roof over her head. Cassie, she would leave, he would bring her back. Security would go and get her. Assistants would go and get her. Employees would go and get her. And bring her right back. She tried to leave. What happened? Allegedly, he broke into Kid Cudi's home. Allegedly, he tried to set Kid Cudi's car on fire. When Cassie and Kid Cudi were no more, Kid Cudi testified that that never happened to him again. His home was never broken into again. His car was never set on fire again. But it's still alleged. And guess what, Absolute 72, you would be wrong because they're already talking about predicate offenses. The government is already talking about predicate offenses in court. That's what people ain't telling y'all. They're already talking about this is one of the predicate offenses. Now, let's see. We're talking about the things that are being used to convict him. We're talking about the things that are being used to convict him. See, you stuck on this for profit, and what you just did was you already named two instances already yourself. You just gave him a RICO from your perspective. But see, the thing is, you're not even hearing me because you're caught up on what it is that you have stuck in your mind. And that's cool for you. But see, I hear what you are saying. You don't hear me though. Because you just stuck up on getting your information, and that's the information that you got, and that's what you stuck on. But what you're not even hearing is how I'm breaking down all of the predicate offenses. You just gave him a RICO though. Either way, you just gave him a RICO by your own admission. Look, if you are an advocate for him, that's fine, but don't come in here coming at me and then you don't want to hear me. It's not going to be a one-sided conversation. I heard you and I saw where you were coming from, but do you hear me? I've already told y'all about the bribery. And then you have obstruction of justice as well and witness tampering because of what happened with Dawn and Kalina, where he had Kalina reach out to Dawn. But what I will say is they did not bring that up in the testimony with Dawn. And I was actually kind of surprised that they did not bring that up. Because I'm like, well, y'all brought that up when y'all did y'all whole press release. Y'all brought that incident up, but y'all didn't even go into it. Ephraim, the bribery came into play where he paid those guards $100,000 for that intercontinental security guards, the security surveillance tape. That's where that came from. Look, at the end of the day, what caused, and I'm going to be honest with y'all, what made me start looking into all of this stuff about RICO was because I was trying to understand it for myself, what was going on. I was trying to understand it. I was reading all of these court docs on these cases that were being brought up against him. Cassie's case and Little Rod's case and this one's case and that one's case. And then, like y'all know, when it got down to the Busbys, I said, these don't sound right. So I'm not covering those. And I stopped covering those because I was just like, these are bad movie scripts. I don't like the way these are reading. I'm not even going to read these because they don't even make sense. So when I was trying to understand what the hell are we talking about here, because this case is like, it's all about Cassie. Is this what this is about? I get it that they read her case and said, oh, well, all of these things that he's been doing to her, those are RICO chargeable. But let me understand what the hell they're talking about here. Because like I keep telling y'all, we're used to seeing RICO show up how it showed up for the mob. It's not showing up like that. And what saddens me is even when people have a difference of opinion, they don't want to hear anything that's going to educate. They're here for the salacious content. If I would have made this thumbnail something about red light specials and UTIs, Jane Doe describes freaky hotel nights with Diddy. If I would have did that and came in here talking about all of the nasty stuff that was going on in the hotel rooms with Diddy and Jane and the escorts, oh, the numbers would be out the freaking roof right now. But because I'm speaking some real facts, I'm speaking some stuff that would educate, I'm invoking thought-provoking conversations. Even with you, Absolute 72, we're having a thought-provoking conversation. I'm not offended. I'm just very passionate about what I'm saying, honey. You haven't done nothing to offend me, so let me be very clear with that, okay? People ain't going to sit down and try to hear this. They don't want to educate themselves. And like I was saying on the Instagram live earlier today, we were laughing and joking, but at the same time, your behind could end up in a RICO unknowingly. When I sat back and looked at my job, I worked at a tow truck company for 5 years as the business manager. And after reading some of this stuff right here, I realized that had my boss got caught up in a RICO, I probably would have got caught up in it too without even realizing that's what I was doing. Because he would tell me to do certain stuff and that was my boss. So I would do what my boss would tell me to do. But now looking, I'm realizing there were laws that were being broke. But you don't think about the laws being broke because these are things that we do every day. Every day. I've broken down consensual and non-consensual so many times that I do not wish to talk about it no more. but simple acts that we've done every day. Absolute 72. Let me ask you this. Did you know that if your girl is sleeping, you decide that you want to slide in from behind, that that's non-consensual? That you could actually catch a charge for that? But that's something that we do every day. They came up with the price of $50,000. Diddy paid them $100,000. And guess what? Brian Steele on cross-examination did not deny that. Brian Steele actually said to Eddie Garcia, you got double what you asked him for, right? Admitting to. Brian Steele ain't deny that. We got to be more, like, for me, this Diddy case is a lot bigger than did he do it or did he not do it, because there's so much that this has touched on. This has actually touched on the fact that there was addiction. Like, we're not looking at this from a third eye perspective. Everybody wants to fight over whether or not he's innocent or guilty. Guess what? We're not on the jury. We ain't on the jury. We're not the judge. We're not on the prosecution or the defense. Salute to Uda on Go. Make sure y'all following his channel. We're not in that courtroom where it matters. Even those of us that are sitting in the courtroom, we are spectating and reporting back. But we do not have the final say on what's going on in this trial. But instead of us looking at, I'm breaking down for y'all the 35 predicate offenses of a RICO, because this is something that we don't know as a people. We don't know things until we find ourselves jammed up and our back is against the wall, or our loved one has their back against the wall. Then you want to start looking at you want to start looking into the laws, and you want the lawyers to tell you what's going on. Law should be something that we all study, because it's something that we all need to know. So when I get up here and I start talking to y'all like, okay, this is where the government is coming from with this, and this, maybe just listen. I'm not talking to anyone in particular. I'm speaking in general. Maybe just listen to what it is that I'm saying. Because I might just be dropping a gem on you that could actually save you later on in life. Like, damn, you find yourself in a situation like, damn, you know what? I was watching that girl, Henny, and she said to look this up. I'm glad I looked that up, because now I know. Then we're talking about addiction at a high level. Y'all looking at all this other stuff. Y'all not looking at the addiction at a high level. Y'all wasn't hearing. Y'all are hearing, getting it repeated back to you from us that are in the courtroom, that are telling y'all about all the substances that they was taking. But you wasn't in there to actually see Brianna sitting there. And we don't know if Brianna is still on substances, or if she's suffering from, allegedly suffering from possible effects from all of the substances that she was taking. And as many times as we've seen Diddy and Cassie out in public, we never knew that they was getting high on drugs the way that they was getting high on drugs. Ketamine, cocaine, Molly, MDMA, mushrooms, all types of psychedelic acid. Like, yo, addiction. This has opened the door for addiction conversations for us to be having. We looking at all of this stuff. Jane is sitting on a damn stand talking about how she was doing them hotel nights. She had to take an E-pill. Why? To disassociate from reality. There's so many talking points that we could actually talk about, besides fighting one another on whether or not Diddy's guilty. Diddy knows what he did. Diddy knows what he didn't do. The Most High God knows what he did and didn't do too. We're listening to the story being told to us from the government side and the prosecution side. I mean, the defense's side. And right now, it's about who could prove and who's giving the best story. Okay, so you said, so wait, someone has a bachelor party with strippers and they get high. That's a RICO then? Because that's two of the charges. No. Okay. If you have a bachelor's party and you bring the strippers there, and the agreement is that they are coming there to entertain, which also includes prostitution, you may have committed a criminal offense if it's a RICO. What makes it a RICO actually absolute, there has to be an enterprise. No matter what you say, no matter how you try to get about it, there has to be a criminal organization attached to it. So if these girls say you are part of a cartel, your cartel member is throwing a bachelor's party, there's drugs there. One of your homeboys takes this girl to the back room and smashes. She's high out, she's highed up, she's liquored up, and he done had sex with her. That's non-consensual. That girl could bring him up on charges. For it to be a RICO, because it's the cartel, they had to have been getting paid for y'all, getting paid. He said, no, let's say I own a football team. I use the cartel just because we already know that there's an illegal enterprise, a network of criminal activity that's going on. If they're paying these girls for prostitution, that these girls are coming out to have sex, that's sex trafficking. That's prostitution. So yeah, you might get in trouble for fluting out somebody. Next time you want to flu somebody out, you might want to think twice about it. And it's fraud. It is fraud if you have somebody, you fly somebody out with the agreement that you're going to give them something if they give you something, and you renege on the quid pro quo. That's fraud. If you tell her, yeah, baby, I'm going to fly you out, and I'm going to give you 5 bands for you to be able to take care of your bills, this, that, and the third. You coming on out here, da-da-da-da. We going to do us. We going to chill. She come out there, y'all go do y'all, and y'all chilling and doing all of that, right? She gets there, you whoop-de-whoop, wham, whoop-de-whoop, wham, and the next thing you know, you send her home and you never give her that $5K? That's fraud. You done committed fraud on the draws. You done defrauded her out her draw. You done frauded her out the draws. The thing is, like you just said, Kristen, the things we do that are considered normal, everyday normalities, you can find yourself easily jammed up in this situation. Nobody was talking about 35 predicate offenses of a RICO before. Nobody was looking at all the stuff that goes into the RICO. Yes, racketeering is RICO. Hey Girl said, so far I only believe Dawn's testimony. I believe women are physically abused. Ooh. Abused, but I do not believe Diddy was the sole monster and they're the victims. They were compensated and continued drug use separate from Diddy. Let's explore that. Let's explore that for a second, what you just said. There is no documented record of drug use with Cassie before Diddy. It has been testified, according to her testimony, that he introduced her to that. He introduced her to that. And she became addicted. Which posed the question that I asked a long time ago. When she was sending all of those messages to him about the freak-offs, was it really the freak-off that she was there for, or was she there to get high? Because he wasn't letting nobody else get her high or get high with her. Jane, had only taken E back in 2013 and 2014, one time. One pill then and one pill then. She hadn't done any since then. She started chewing down E pills like Tic Tacs, once she got with him. Diddy is still paying Jane's rent due to the love contract that they signed. Her friend who did drugs with her, Ephraim, came after she had been with Diddy. Cassie was with Diddy in 2008. They're talking about stuff that was happening in 2016. That means that 8 years have gone by. 8 years of drug use, 8 years of freak offs, 8 years of being put into this lifestyle. Jane Doe testified to the fact that she just started moving robotically because she knew what she had to do. He tried to stop Brianna from giving Cassie drugs, but he was still giving Cassie drugs. Explain that. He tried to stop Brianna from getting high with Cassie, but he was still getting high with Cassie. Uniquely, right? It is. Okay, so since you don't want me to use but, then let's say it like this. He didn't want Brianna to get high with Cassie. However, he was still getting high with her. They were still getting high. They were still getting high together. What part of that is being missed and skipped? And that's according to testimony. Cassie and Diddy were done in 2018. Now introduce Jane. Now what I'm going to say to y'all about Jane, let me say this to you. The way it started off was a violation of girl code. Not going to lie about it. I think every female in here will agree with me when I say this. The way it started, it was a violation of girl code. According to her testimony, she first met Diddy while on a girls' trip. A girls' trip that Diddy funded. How did Diddy fund a girl trip that Jane Doe met him at when she didn't even know him? Because Diddy was dealing with one of her friends. But Diddy saw her, took an interest in her. She was going to the bathroom. He was at the bathroom. They exchanged numbers and said they needed code names. So they became Bert and Ernie. That's her testimony. She said after the vacation was over, the girls' date was over, and she went back home, he continued communicating with her through FaceTime, text messages, and phone calls. Mind you, he was dealing with her friend. The very friend that brought her on the girls' trip. But she says that when her friend moved on, got engaged, moved overseas, and she knew her friend was no longer dealing with Diddy, she told him she had an event in Miami. Diddy paid for her hotel room. She flew on down. She went to the hotel. Diddy comes to the door. She lets him in. They have a conversation. She explains to him who her child's father is and that it's somebody that he doesn't get along with. After that conversation, She says they made love. They watched the sunset. They walked on the beach. That it was romantic, and she ended up staying for 5 days. They took a trip to Turks and Caicos for her birthday. She told him it was going to be her birthday soon. He said, let's have an island birthday. She goes on a trip with him to Turks and Caicos. It's beautiful. They're making all this passionate love, and she's just falling for him. They're chilling in the pool, and he hands her an E pill. She pops the E, and at some point in time, she becomes overwhelmed by it. She says she fell out in the sand and was throwing it around, and KK took her to the bathroom, and KK and Jess took her to the bathroom, put her in the shower to sober her up. The next day, Diddy dosed her. Figured, hey, you can't handle a whole pill, so I'm going to give you a piece of a pill, and we're going to work your way up. Things going good between the two of them for a while. Diddy pays for her to move from where she was to the West Coast. And then one night while they watching Corn, they start playing What's Your Fantasy? The subject comes up of getting busy with another dude while he watches. She says, okay, I'll do that. But she said in her mind, she thought it would be somewhere later in the future, if ever. She didn't think it was really a thing that was going to happen. But as soon as she gave the okay, he hopped up out of bed and ran into the bathroom, got on his phone, came back out. And next thing she knows, she being whisked from the house to the hotel. They get to the hotel. He picked out her lingerie. He picked out her shoes. Hold on. Let me back up because I skipped a step. When they walked into the hotel, the assistants are in the hotel setting up the room. Blankets, sheets, and towels covering everything because there's 24 bottles of baby oil. That's 24 bottles of baby oil there. She's already high on E because they was popping E at the house. He picked out her lingerie and her shoes just like he did for Cassie. Yes, Diddy. He tells her, relax, it's okay, I know this guy. It's going to be all right. Coaches her into it. The guy goes by the name of Don. Comes in. She says she's sitting there with her legs crossed and her arms crossed like this. Now both of them are telling her to relax. It's going to be all right. Coercion. She said she started dancing to try to ease the nerves that she had going on inside of her. Then they started dancing together. And she started rubbing oil on him. And they started touching each other. And then she started doing foreplay. And then I believe it's Comey who's questioning her, says, and what was Sean doing? What was Mr. Combs doing while you were giving foreplay? He was being encouraging and positive. Once the foreplay happened, she took Don into the bedroom. Diddy sitting in the corner. She engages in the intimate act with Don. She thinks when it's all said and done, because when Don was finished, her and Diddy got busy. She thought it was just going to be that one night. Like it was taboo. It was exciting because it was something that she had never done before. She didn't think that she would be doing it again. And if they did, it would probably be Once in a blue moon, if ever. The next time she goes to see him, she's back in a freak off, or as they call it, a hotel night. She goes on to describe how Diddy chose who was coming, how many rounds they would go, and how many men it would be. She talked about how it would be anywhere from 1 to 3 men. She would be going rounds with them. Sometimes one man could go 3 rounds. The next man could go 2 rounds. And let's not forget that Diddy is the finishing round. She talked about how Diddy didn't want her using a condom. We heard audio that corroborated that. When asked, why would you keep going? She said, because I wanted to please my lover. I wanted to make my lover happy. This girl had testified to falling for him after spending those 5 days with him. From that point forward, all she wanted was to spend time with him, be loved by him, held by him, hugged by him. She wanted to be a part of his life. She wanted him to love on her as she loved on him. She said she would go through these freak offs because she knew at the end of the freak off, she would be able to get what she wanted, which was the time with him. Now, some of y'all may not like what I'm about to say, but it is a fact that we cannot skip over. I feel like it was a test, just like it was a test with Cassie, to see if you could get put into that position. How desperate were you to be in his world, a part of his life? When these girls were going, you damn right they was probably trying to hook up with him because he was a billionaire. He's a multi-millionaire. He's showing them different things. Jane testified she had never been to Turks and Caicos. Cassie, Turks and Caicos, Paris. She's traveling the world with him. He's opening her up to a whole new world. They signed up to be with a multimillionaire. They did not sign up to be mentally, physically abused. They did not sign up for that. You absolutely right, CJ. People hook up with people who don't even got that kind of money. I agree, Miss Tiff, that is way too much to go through. That love contract you speaking of, hey girl, didn't come into play until way after. That love contract came into play. Now, Jane said she knew she wasn't the only one. The relationship was monogamous for her, but it wasn't for him. She understood that. Let me say this to y'all right now, ladies. Stop telling these men that you okay with something that you're not okay with. Stop saying, oh, I know you got other women and it's okay. I'm cool with where I'm at. Because at some point in time, you're behind going to catch feelings. And men, stop doing that ish too. At some point in time, your behind is going to catch feelings. And you're going to want to be the only one or the one at the top. But see, what you do in the position that you in right then and there signs you up for what you're going to be. Cassie could never get out of those freak offs. Jane could never get out of those freak offs because Diddy referred to Jane as his freak. Right, Coley. He was carrying. If y'all remember, inside of that medicine bag at one point in time, we had testimony that there was Plan Bs in the medicine bag. The reason the Plan Bs were in the medicine bag is because there were times that he wanted these escorts, these random men that she did not know, to happy fizz, I'm sorry, inside of her or somewhere near her punana. And then he would go sleep with her. Be it Cassie, be it Jane. Go sleep with them with no cleanup right after that, with all that man's happy fizz all over her, inside of her. And you got to think, if they was going for 3 rounds, that means that man finished 3 times. She got happy fizz all over her, and he's over there rolling around in it with her, and then happy jizzing on top of that, and then playing in it. And she taking a plan B to make sure she don't get pregnant. She was desperate for him to love her. I'm not going to deny that. Because at some point in time, after hearing her break down and talk about how she loved him, she was doing it because she loved him and she wanted to make him happy. Isn't this the same thing that we heard from Cassie? She was doing it because she loved him. So for those people who say she signed up for this, she ain't signed up for that. She said at one point in time, while they were watching Corn together, her and Diddy were watching these men. And she came across a dude that she liked. Karal, something like that. I can't remember the name right now. And they were watching this man perform on a Corn tape. And they were talking about this man's junk, his manhood. And she said, Comey asked her, and what was Mr. Combs doing while y'all were looking at it? He was being positive and encouraging, saying things like, you want that, you want to taste that, you want to feel that. She picked 2 of the dudes that would be a part of these hotel nights because she knew that this was what she signed up for now at this point in time. Once she opened that Pandora's box, she knew she couldn't close it. She knew this had now become a part of their interactions. And she said if there were going to be men going into her body, she wanted to have some kind of say-so over who it would be. So she picked these 2 dudes that she knew. Then there was Don, who was the regular. But she couldn't control how many guys were coming that night. She couldn't say how many rounds she was willing to take. She would be tired. And she would give him little subtle cues by telling him like she's hungry or laying down or making a face. And he would say things to her like, you're not getting tired on me, are you? Let's finish strong. Coaching her, and it's still going. And all she kept saying was, she just wanted to be with him. She would pop E like crazy to go through those freak offs, or hotel nights as she called them. Because at the end, she would just be with him, and that's what she wanted. She liked when it was just the two of them. But now, do y'all see the pattern that has become? In order for her to get what she wants, she got to go through these hotel nights. She got to sleep with these men. Sleep with 2 men in one night. Sleep with 3 men in one night. While this man that she's pouring out her heart and feelings to is watching and self-satisfying, sometimes joining in. Because in Jane's testimony, that's where we began to hear about Diddy joining in. When you're sitting there and you're listening to these testimonies being given and you're hearing all of the details, people are getting caught up on the salaciousness of Diddy's dirty deeds. But as I'm listening to Jane's testimony and I'm listening to her, let me grab my book. Her birthday. Another birthday comes around. And on her birthday, he tells her it's going to be just her and him. And he flies her out to Miami. And they go to the hotel. She described a random man, not random off the street, but a random to her, she doesn't know him, that was brought into the room for a hotel night on her birthday after he promised her that it was going to be just them, because she asked him, she told him she didn't want to do a hotel night. She just wanted to be with him. And he told her, okay. And when she got there, it was something else. She described how this man was sweaty, sweating profusely, dripping sweat. He had a little bit of an odor to him. And she said, even though she did not want to, she tried. She tried to get into the groove with him. She tried to touch him, but she couldn't. Diddy sees she's struggling. He takes her in the room, lays her down. He starts doing her. The sweaty guy is standing over her with his joint in her face. And Diddy's saying, you want to taste that? And she's repulsed and disgusted. He sees he can't coach her into sleeping with this guy, so he dismisses her. And they switch rooms. And they go into the other room. And the other room is dinner. It's a cake. It's flowers. It's balloons. It's a gift. It's beautiful. It's what she wanted. She's thinking it's just going to be him. They're having dinner. They're enjoying themselves. And he says, I have a surprise for you. and one of the escorts show up. And she's right back into a hotel night that she thought she wasn't going to be in. I'm trying to find. She ends up doing not just the one guy. She ends up doing another guy too. So it wasn't just one escort that showed up to the door. It was two escorts that showed up to the door. One after the other. And that was her birthday. She said it ended up being 3 rounds, 18 hours. She broke down crying several times while she was on the witness stand. And all she kept saying was she didn't want to do it, but she had to. Then comes where she moves from her apartment into a home. She wanted this big, beautiful house for her son with this big, beautiful backyard, and it was $10,000 a month. And her and Diddy had gotten into it, and they had an argument, and they made up, and he asked her, how much allowance do you think you should get? And she said 15,000. He said 10. And when she said 10, she decided to take that 10 and go get her a house. And the 10 that he was giving her was paying for that house. And she was living off of whatever allowance he gave her and her child support. Now I'm going to say, girl, that was dumb as hell. That man giving you 10K. You better stay where you at and stack your bread. If that's what you were going to do. Now she done gave him complete control over the roof over her and her son's head. Just like Cassie, complete control over her life. Why they don't just leave? Once you've been in something and you get programmed into that, for somebody to move robotically in something means they've been programmed. He controlled Cassie's when she could make music, when she couldn't make music, where she lived, what she wore, how her hair was, her makeup, her nails, who she could be with, who she couldn't be with, all the way down to who and when she could and couldn't get high with, and when she just couldn't get high in general. Have you ever been in love? Have you ever been in love? He controlled Cassie so much. She's had so much music recorded that never got dropped. Did y'all know that he dropped an album of hers for free online? Which means she made no profit. He had complete control. So now she's stuck because when she texts him a text message, and it was very long, and I can't wait to get the transcript so that I could read it to y'all. In that text message, and I'm paraphrasing, she spoke to not wanting to do the hotel nights. Him telling, her, all right, you don't want to do the hotel nights no more? Then I'm going to stop paying the rent. She ain't say, I don't want to be your girl no more. She ain't say, this is over between the two of us. She ain't say, I'm done with you. Leave me alone. Get out my life. She ain't say none of that. She said, I don't want to do the hotel nights anymore. In her text message, she talked about how she wrote him and told him that she can't tell him no now because that's the roof over her and her child's head. Because she couldn't afford to pay that rent on her own. She went on to list about 10, 11 different escorts that she had been with. This girl was only with him from 2021 up to when he got arrested. They had a big blowout because he took his girlfriend, or one of his girlfriends, to Turks and Caicos. She wanted to go back to Turks. She felt like she deserved to go back to Turks. Hell, she testified that when it came down to doing the hotel nights, all the work was on her. All the work was on her. Which was true. Because she was the one that was sleeping with these multiple men. And then sleeping with him afterwards. But she wanted out of the hotel nights and couldn't get out of it now. See, you done dug yourself into a hole that you can't get out of with this man because your mind is so gone because you so in love with him. Because what you got to remember is when you're going through something like this, in between the bad times, there are good times, and all you want to do is get back to that good time. You want to do any and everything that you can to get to that good time. You don't want to be in the bad times. Exactly. The honeymoon stage. He honeymooned her. And I don't know why there's women in here acting like you ain't never been honeymooned by a 9-to-5 nigga. Don't get up in here and act brand new, sis. You done been gaslit. You done been honeymooned and Prince Charminged. Fellas, maybe not some of y'all in this chat, but some of them that'll be on the replay. Don't act like y'all ain't never G'd a female and got what you wanted out of her. Don't act like y'all ain't never had a female that loved you so much, she was so desperate for you, she would do anything for you. Absolute, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. Let me say this to those who are coming in, those who may be new here. I cannot confirm nor deny the identity of Jane Doe. I know who Jane Doe is, but I cannot confirm nor deny the identity of Jane Doe, nor can I confirm or deny who her child's father is, because as a person who is sitting in the courtroom, who sits in the courtroom, we are under court order and we cannot say. So I don't know what you're talking about. Absolute 72. I don't know what you're talking about. Thank you for being honest, Swagalo, and saying you sold plenty of dreams at your young age, but nothing like Diddy. But this is what I'm saying. When Jane Doe got up and testified, I don't see how people can't. Well, Peter Stevens, you're saying, what about personal accountability? We can't hold her accountable. Only she can hold herself accountable. Because as the public, the accountability that we would hold her to is not conducive to her healing. There's such a thing called healthy accountability, and healthy accountability can only be achieved once you have gone through healing and dealing with the mess, where you can then sit back and say to yourself, damn, I should have left. At that point, I should have left. That was my opportunity to leave. Damn, I shouldn't have agreed to this. We can't hold her accountable for that. Only she can do that. But now here, I'm going to flip that around on somebody. How much accountability do you want her to take when she's been mentally mind fucked? She wasn't talentless. Ephraim, you finally got some attention because I've been seeing you. Cassie was not talentless. She didn't have her stuff promoted and pushed out. There's a difference between talentless and not being allowed to push. As a label, he was supposed to push her as an artist. But as her man, he used that over her head for leverage. That's what you got to understand. You got to start having conversations with your daughters and your sons. Because as I'm looking at this RICO, as I'm listening to Jane Doe, I'm like, damn, I know females that have been dummied over love. Well, that man don't send you a good morning text. Not even every other morning, not even once a week. That man just sends you a good morning text when he wants you to come over and drop them drawers for him. That man speak real nice to you when he wants something from you. But you're so in love that you don't even see it. Jane Doe testified to having to have a babysitter ready to go at the drop of a dime. Sitting around, spending her days being ready. She had to be ready. Because when Diddy called, she had to go. Had to keep her nails done. Had to keep her hair a certain way. Had to stay tanned. Thank you. So we start looking at everyday life a little bit differently. When we start getting into these conversations, instead of the salaciousness of it all, how about we start having these real conversations about it? Dr. Dawn Hughes, her testimony was very powerful and important because she spoke about the mindset and the mentality of what happens when people go through these grooming and gaslighting and honeymooning, and when they go through all of these stages and what happens to them mentally. It's hard for you to just get up and leave when you're a prisoner in your own mind. Nobody put a pew pew to their head and made them do it. No, because they were in here already. They got in here already. Once a person can get in your mind and control your mind, they can control you. She was just trying to get to that next fix. She said the best time after the freak offs, after the hotel nights, was at the end, because that's when she got to be. I got to be with Sean, and it was just me and Sean, and we would leave the hotel and go to his house. And I would shower him and make sure he was cleaned and put on his favorite TV show. I would cook for him and massage him, and we would cuddle and we would sleep together. Peter, we can't have that conversation. She was bought hook, line, and sinker. Cassie, hook, line, and sinker. Now, a lot of people are talking about it was domestic violence. This is domestic violence. This is violence that was being used to keep these girls in line. Jane Doe hasn't even testified to the violence yet. She hasn't. She hasn't. Hold on. Because I've already played for y'all Jane Doe. Okay? Where's the opening statements? I need the opening statements. Give me 1 second. Let me pull these opening statements up for y'all. And then I'm gonna explain to y'all why this opening statement is so important. Let me put it up on the screen for you guys. Hold on. I'm coming. All right, so we're going to get the screen back how we had it before, because I'm about to open up, I'm about to put up here on this screen for y'all the opening statements. So y'all can read along, because I did a video on Who is Jane, but not a lot of people heard it, all right? A lot of this trial will focus on just two of those women, Cassie, who I talked about earlier, and Jane. Some of the details of what happened to Cassie and Jane may be hard to hear, but this is what the evidence will show happened. The defendant used lies, drugs, threats, and violence to force and coerce first Cassie and later Jane. Did you hear that? Did y'all hear that? The defendant used lies, drugs, threats, and violence to force and coerce first Cassie and later Jane to have sex with him in front of male escorts. The defendant insisted that the sex occur in a very specific, highly orchestrated way, These sexual performances lasted days and they involved multiple escorts. The defendant called these encounters by different names over the years. First freak-offs, later wild king nights or hotel nights. Week after week, the defendant directed freak-offs in hotels across the country and sometimes out of the country. Because Jane testified to getting her Turks and Caicos vacation. And the first night they were there, they had sex together. It was beautiful. They was making love. And then the next night, boom, the escorts showed up. At times, the defendant had escorts and the women travel from out of state. So the defendant's staff sometimes organized flights, cars, and hotels. The defendant's business paid for those expenses. There you go, right there. Where the employees come in at. The defendant had particular demands for freak-offs. At his direction, the defendant's staff set up rooms in advance with supplies, like his preferred lighting, extra linen, and lubricants. His staff remained on call to refresh anything the defendant needed, like cash to pay the escorts or drugs for the women and the defendant. The hotel rooms were dark. The defendant instructed Cassie and Jane how to look, to dress in lingerie, wear tall platform high heels, and have manicured white nails. The defendant selected drugs for Cassie and Jane to take, usually MDMA, Molly, or ecstasy. Sometimes those drugs made Cassie and Jane sick, but they also made the women more uninhibited and sexually aroused. The defendant fed Cassie and Jane drugs throughout the freak-off so they could stay awake and perform for him for hours and days at a time. Once an escort arrived, the defendant dictated every step of the sexual activity that followed. Sexual activity that followed the same pattern. And he expected the women to enjoy themselves, to appear to, while they did. The defendant masturbated throughout the freak-offs and often video recorded part of them. She goes in to tell us about Cassie, but I want to get into Jane for y'all because that's where we are right now. All right, hold on one second. All right, now I want to tell you about Jane. Jane was a single mom who started spending time with the defendant in 2020. The defendant pursued the romance Jane, who fell in love with him quickly. Jane was not seeing other men, but the defendant was seeing other women at the time. So his relationship with Jane was not public. For the first few months, their sex life was just the two of them, and Jane was happy. That wasn't until the defendant introduced Jane to freak-offs. One night when they had already taken drugs and had been having sex for hours, the defendant told Jane about freak-offs. Jane agreed to try one to make the defendant happy. To her surprise, the defendant said he would make it happen immediately. That very same night, he took her to a hotel where a room was already set up and an escort was on the way. Jane was nervous and the defendant directed her step by step. Jane thought the first freak-off was a one-time wild night. Jane was wrong. The defendant continued asking Jane to have freak-offs and promising that if she did, they would spend quality time together. They would go on dates together. They would go on trips. That was what Jane wanted more than anything, a real relationship, so she agreed. She helped plan freak-offs and reached out. She helped plan freak-offs and reach out to escorts. But even though the defendant promised her quality time and trips, he never delivered. Those were just lies, he told her, to get more nights in dark hotel rooms with escorts. Jane will tell you about those nights in detail, how she wanted the escorts to wear condoms, but many times the defendant did not let them. And Jane will tell you how he had her taking drugs to stay awake and aroused for days. And she was taking Xanny to go to sleep because she couldn't go to sleep at night after those hotel nights. Jane tried twice to make it through the nights without drugs. The first time she broke down and had took ecstasy to finish performing for the defendant. The second time, Jane vomited after having sex with one escort. How did how did the defendant respond? He told her to hurry up and get back in the room where another escort was waiting. Early on, Jane told the defendant she didn't like freak-offs and she just wanted to be alone with him. She loved him desperately and wanted a real relationship with him. The defendant didn't listen. Feeling stuck and sick of strangers, the defendant kept bringing to these hotel rooms. Jane tried to assert herself in small ways. She found two men who performed in pornography. She invited them to join the freak-offs. That way, Jane could at least choose the other man she was forced to be intimate with. Like he did with Cassie, the defendant eventually took steps to control Jane financially. The defendant wanted Jane available to meet with him at a moment's notice, and he discouraged her from working. Jane's income plummeted. The defendant gave Jane money and later started paying the rent for her house that she lived with her child in. Jane's income, I already read that. That way, when Jane resisted the freak-offs and told him over and over that she wanted to stop, he had the power to coerce her back into the hotel rooms. And just as he had with Cassie, the defendant threatened Jane with the videos he recorded of her engaging in sex acts with escorts. But the lies and drugs and threats were not the end of it. Not even a year ago today, Jane had the worst day of her life. The defendant came to Jane's house for an at-home date night. She and the defendant argued about another woman that the defendant had been seeing. Jane was upset and jealous. She had now spent years in hotel rooms for forced sex while the defendant took his other girlfriends for dates and trips. Jane hit the defendant and threw things at him. The defendant became enraged. So Jane tried to get away from him and hide. She ran to her bedroom and locked the door. He kicked it open. She ran to her bathroom and locked the door. He kicked it open. She ran to her closet and he kicked the door. And locked the door. He kicked it open. She ran to the guest bedroom and locked the door. He kicked it open. She tried to run out of the front door, but he grabbed her in a chokehold, lifted her off the ground by her neck, and kicked her to the ground. Later that night, they fought again, and just as he had with Cassie, the defendant viciously attacked Jane. He punched her in the face, kicked her while she was curled up in a ball on the ground, dragged her by her hair and her arm, and slapped Jane's face so hard she fell over. When all of this was over, the defendant still did not let Jane be. Instead, he told Jane, "You're not going to fuck up my night." The defendant instructed her to put on an outfit and call up an escort for a freak-off. He made Jane cover her black eye and bruising, take an ecstasy pill, and perform for the defendant with the escort. Jane followed his instructions. Like with Cassie, the defendant's violence had gotten him what he wanted. The defendant's sexual violence did not stop at freak-offs, though. And then that's when they get into him graping Cassie. What are you talking about, Terry, Bankhead? You don't have to answer, but it really don't take a rocket scientist to figure it out. Come on, people, use your brain. What are we supposed to be using our brain for that we're not using our brain for? And let me just say something, because I was watching the TMZ thing with Joe Tecapina, however you say his name. And while they were having their round the screen face off, he's a defense attorney who defended these types of cases, which means he defended the person who committed the act. And him being up there really grosses me out because he kept saying, why not call the police? Why not call the police and get a restraining order? Let me tell y'all something about a restraining order. A restraining order is a piece of paper, and there have been plenty of people who have gotten restraining orders and still ended up dead. That's fact, not fiction. A restraining order says that a person can't be within a certain amount of feet from you, but that still does not stop them from stalking you. Well, looks like you found yourself hello from the other side. Looks like you're on the other side now, Terry. Talking to yourself, because I won't see those comments. And we're not just talking about women. There are men that get stalked and unalived by females too. But all of this, call the police and press charges and all that other, doesn't do anything. A restraining order? A restraining order absolutely sometimes makes things even worse. The object is not to stay. The object is to leave. A person will attempt to leave. Statistically, they say a woman will attempt to leave 7 times before she is actually gone. And the most dangerous time for a person who is in one of those types of relationships is when they try to leave. That's the most dangerous time. I'm not saying don't get a restraining order. What I'm saying is sometimes that doesn't help. I had a restraining order. That crazy fool was still messaging me. He violated the restraining order. I went to court. Gave the text messages to the detectives. They picked him up, but guess what? That still didn't stop. Because he had his lawyer contact me one time. Thank you for the super chat, Miss Tiff. And then, oh, let me tell y'all the kicker for me. When he tried to take me to court for custody, he wanted joint custody of the kids because he didn't want me to be able to move out of state without his permission. And unbeknownst to me, we get up there into the courtroom and the judge says, "Why are we even here? Did you know that you still have a restraining order against him?" The restraining order had expired and the DA didn't even bother to let me know that I still had a restraining order on him. And this fool was coming to my house 2 o'clock in the morning, drunk, banging on my door, trying to get in, calling my phone, texting me, harassing me, popping up. And all that time I had a restraining order and didn't even know. So you know what that means? I could have ended up unalived. Do you know 2 years ago, I could have ended up gone? I could have been gone. I could have been out of here. I hope he found peace on the other side and his soul is resting. He unalived himself. But he came to my house 2 days before he unalived himself saying he had a Christmas gift for me. So when you start talking about restraining orders and calling cops and all that other stuff, it depends on the level of what's off up here. Now you talking a man that has money, power, and privilege, and you calling police and you hearing how the police are reacting to speeding tickets, you calling the police on him. You absolutely right. It could get real dark real quick. Real dark real quick. No, I'm not saying, I'm not one of those people that's going to be sitting here saying, you should have left, you could have left long time ago, you should have left, you could have left long time ago. Because sometimes leaving is not even an option at the moment until they mentally are ready to go. They have to be mentally ready to go. Because it is a mental, it is psychological warfare when you've got a person in here. I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. Remember, what's love got to do with it? I'm in here and I'm in here. That's a real statement. Thank you for the gifts. So when you start hearing about the mentality of things, it ain't that easy, you guys. Before I get off of this live, I want to read a little something from Dr. Dawn Hughes. Because I said I was going to do that. I said I was going to do that. Dr. Hughes, are you familiar with the term referred to as love bombing? Dr. Hughes, yes. Question, what is that? Dr. Dawn Hughes. So love bombing is a term that's used now in the popular media. How we understand it in the literature is that honeymoon phase that I talked about. When a victim is trying to eradicate herself, from the relationship or leave the relationship, the perpetrator, the abuser, showers them with love and affection and attention and, presents and gifts. And this is really a tactic to bring that trust and dependence back and get that victim back in a relationship. Dr. Hughes, when a victim does Dr. Hughes, when a victim does attempt to leave an abusive relationship, does that tend to happen immediately or over time? Dr. Hughes, no, it happens over time. We know from the research that it takes multiple attempts to leave an abusive relationship. There's reconciliation, and then there's leaving again. And it could take multiple times. And what obstacles are present for a victim at the time that they are attempting to leave the relationship? Dr. Hughes. So at the time that they're attempting to leave, that is usually met with intense fear on the victim. They're afraid of retaliation. They have been with a partner who has abused them, who has hurt them, who has shown them that they are willing to use serious forms of violence against them. And they're afraid of more retaliation or more danger. And that is not unwarranted. Do victims ever return to the abusive relationship after leaving? Dr. Dawn Hughes, yes, they do. There's this pattern of returning and reconciliation and trying to leave again. And why do they return? Dr. Hughes. So they return for love. They return for the companionship. They return for the good version of their partner that they still do love. And sometimes they return because the abuse is continuing. And if the abuse is continuing when they left and they're still being harassed and followed and surveillanced and controlled, I might as well go back in the relationship because it's not working here. I'm not free. Now, let's look up the honeymoon phase, shall we? Question. You referenced to informal types of coping. Can you describe what that means? Dr. Dawn Hughes. So the informal strategies that are the ones where they're trying to get the abuser to stop the abusive behavior by talking to family or friends, or talking or trying to get their friends to talk to him, or their family to talk to him, or trying to get them to go to church or go to counseling. And it's also talking to family and friends to try to get much needed support for the victim of how I'm going to continue to deal with this mess. Question. Finally, what are types of personal coping mechanisms? Dr. Hughes. So the personal strategies are what the victim uses within the relationship. So it's not trying to get out of the relationship, but what do I do that I'm in it? What do I do that I'm in it? These are trying to talk to your partner to try to stop the violence, talk about what's going on, trying to get counseling or help, trying to plead and negotiate for different kinds of behaviors, trying to place it and give compliance to make your partner okay. Sometimes it's physically fighting back. It's all of these different strategies that a victim is doing, but within the relationship, within the confines of the relationship. Question. You've described now these different types of coping mechanisms: formal, informal, personal. Which of these is most common? Dr. Dawn Hughes. The personal strategies are the most common that they're trying to use within the relationship, trying to work it out with your partner. Question. Why is that the most common? Dr. Dawn Hughes. Because of the trauma bond, because of the feeling entrapped that you can't leave, because of the psychological consequences that you're being burdened with, and you don't want to lose your partner. You still want to try to preserve the love of that partner. You have this hope for change, which comes from the honeymoon phase and that cycle. So you're trying to do everything you can with that partner, within that relationship, to make this violence stop. Question. Within the personal coping mechanisms you mentioned quite a few. Does a victim use all those personal coping mechanisms? Now, let's pull that up. Let's pull that up real quick. I've never heard of that. Romeo pimp tactic. I've never heard of that. Okay. Dr. Hughes, I want to move on to a new topic now. You testified for a while now about why victims remain in a relationship. Okay, so you know what? Why doesn't she leave? This is a good one for all of those people asking those questions. Why doesn't she just leave? Right? So you need psychological resources to leave, but you also need the tangible resources to leave. What we see in a lot of these situations of domestic violence, there's a lot of financial control. So if your abuser controls the money for, housing, transportation, healthcare, childcare, and just general sort of expenses of living. How are you to leave if you don't have access to those tangible resources? And sometimes the financial control is about sabotaging the victim's ability to have independence, taking away her laptop, taking away, and then they objected. All right. And then she kept on and went on and said, so if you don't have access to tangible resources, money, or an apartment, you left with a feeling, oh man, where is it? I lost where I was, you guys. I lost where I was. Okay. We could talk about this part. My bad. I lost that part. Oops. All right. So it says Steiner. Miss Steiner. No, that's not Miss Steiner. Oh, yeah. Miss Steiner is who? AUSA Steiner. All right. Says, based on, again, your clinical expertise and your review of the literature, how common how common is it for a victim to remain in an abusive relationship? Dr. Dawn Hughes. So it's very common. Steiner. So it's very common. Dr. Steiner, can you please describe what the academic literature states about why victims do stay in abusive relationships? Can you move that please uniquely? So Dr. Dawn Hughes goes on and says, yes. So there are three main categories that the research has looked at. This is a question that has been explored extensively over the last 40, 50 years. And the three main kinds of areas are: one, they stay in a relationship because it's not just about hitting. It's about using a lot of different abusive behaviors that make a victim feel entrapped in the relationship and those abusive behaviors. It can be physical violence, but it is also psychological abuse, emotional abuse, economic abuse, surveillance abuse, and all types of behaviors conspire together to keep the victim trapped in a relationship and make them feel like they can't leave. Secondly, we know that in these types of relationships, there is almost always love and attention and attraction and companionship. And it's those positive feelings that when they get paired with the violence and the abuse, make it very difficult for the victim to see their way out. It creates an intense psychological bond and attachment that attachment with their abuser that makes it difficult for them to leave. And the third bucket, the third reason why we know why individuals have a hard time leaving the relationship is because of the psychological consequences from the abuse itself. We know that in the psychiatric and psychological literature, that exposure to repeated acts of violence and sexual assaults result in significant psychological disorders and symptoms, and that makes it difficult for individuals to have higher order planning to leave. Okay? Steiner. And again, briefly, Dr. Hughes, when you say higher order of planning to leave, can you define what you mean by that? So Dr. Dawn Hughes says, Sure, in order to leave a very complex, difficult situation, it's hard for us to break up with someone under the best of circumstances. And then when you have all this violence and abuse, you're just trying to kind of live day to day in this micro way of trying to avoid being hit, avoid being yelled at, avoid being hurt. And that interferes with all of these other resources. We need to think about, how am I going to get out of this relationship? So then she gets asked, and the first area of study, Dr. Hughes, that you just mentioned is, you said that there's a combination of types of abuse that is not just about hitting. Can you briefly explain what you mean when you say it is not just about hitting? Dr. Hughes, right, because it's about the power and control that the abuser has over the victim. And the hitting is just one tool that the abuser uses. The abuser uses other tools such as psychological abuse, okay? So now Steiner goes on to say, turning first to the physical abuse, the hitting, what effects does that have on a victim's ability to leave the relationship? So when you are hit, harmed, beat up, the normal human emotion that gets arisen is fear. We feel scared. And it's very hard to take that fear away once you've been hit. So what happens is the victim, the brain organizes around that fear. And that fear is now organized around the relationship. So they're always sort of walking on eggshells, trying not to do something to get hit. Once again, the resources are now being devoted to, how do I stay safe in this relationship and not over here? How do all of these things, and not over here, how do I do all these things I need to do to get out? So fear is also very a very debilitating emotion. When you feel anxiety, sort of butterflies in your stomach, that's the low level fear. When you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die on this roller coaster, that's the high level fear. So if you're in high level arousal and high level fear, you're not really able to start thinking about these other big deal things on your plate that you have to do, like leaving an abusive relationship. It doesn't have to happen. The abuse doesn't have to happen all of the time. We know that once someone has shown us not only the ability, but the willingness to use violence against us, that link has been set. Like our brains don't forget. We know that it can be forthcoming. And then with the other types of behaviors, the threats, the control, the put downs, that so solidifies and reinforces that threat, even without using more physical violence. Are y'all still with me? Did I lose y'all? I'm losing people. People are not trying to hear this, but this is what you need to hear. You're asking questions. Dr. Hughes, so you also mentioned earlier that psychological abuse can be a factor. How does psychological abuse cause a victim to remain in a relationship? Dr. Hughes. So psychological abuse is about threatening future violence and about controlling your victim. So when you're doing things that the abuser doesn't want you to do, there are negative consequences for that. That could be physically violent acts, or that can be other acts. So the physical, psychological violence looks like intimidation, like threats, like throwing things, like telling you you can't go, like telling you where you can go and what you can do. Because psychological abuse is so controlling, it makes the victim feel entrapped in that relationship. It makes them feel afraid because of the threats that they can't get out. It makes them feel intimidated to make choices to get out because of that fear. It has a tremendous amount of psychological distress when you're always trying to figure out what abusive behavior is coming at me and which time. This is the proverbial feeling of walking on eggshells and not know what's coming next. Psychological distress is a symptom of depression, symptoms of anxiety, symptoms of PTSD, where you're constantly being reminded of the acts that come before. And you're really sort of on an equilibrium trying to keep yourself physically and psychologically safe and not able to be thinking about how am I going to get out of this relationship. So now I'm hoping that little brief sharing of transcript and testimony from Dr. Dawn Hughes actually explains why they don't leave. Like, if you open the door after being caged in for years, you still won't leave the cage if the door is left open. Facts. Because they probably don't even realize that the door is open. Man, I don't know what they mix in that ish, but that drink had me slumped on the islands. Oh, you talking about something else? Yes, just like every DV situation. So that's why they don't leave, for all of those that have been questioning that keep saying that, oh, they could just leave. Why don't they just leave? Why don't they just leave? That explained why they don't just leave. Because they're caught in this vicious cycle of just trying not to get hit, trying not to piss them off. That's what they're focused on. They're not focused on, let me get up out of here. They're focused on, how can I get, and you keep hearing that in Jane Doe and Cassie, even Mia. I just wanted to keep him happy. I'm going to tell him reinforcing positive things, because if I'm doing that, then he's not being mean. He's not hitting. He's not, let me just give him what he wants. And then your life becomes, before you know it, you're stuck in a cycle of doing things to keep him happy, because when you don't make him happy, the consequence is abuse. Especially when you're threatened. Yeah. So this is why I said to y'all, this is people, a lot of people did not cover Dr. Dawn Hughes in her entirety. I don't know what lies you're talking about, John. And the sad part about it is, a lot of people are re-victimizing people. Diddy never denied the violence. Diddy never denied any of this stuff. So y'all could act like y'all don't hear or don't see or don't know that he's already taken accountability for the violence, because right after Cassie's video, he issued an apology. I think folks forget that. So let me just go ahead. Let me remind you.
difficult to reflect on the darkest times in your life. Sometimes you gotta do that. I was fucked up. I mean, I hit rock bottom, but I make no excuses. My behavior on that video is inexcusable. I take full responsibility for my actions in that video. I'm disgusted. I was disgusted then when I did it. I'm disgusted now. I went and I sought out professional help. I had to go into therapy and go into rehab. I had to ask God for his mercy and grace. I'm so sorry. But I'm committed to be a better man each and every day. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm truly sorry.
That's not somebody saying they didn't do it. And the sad part about that is, when they picked him up, he had drugs in his possession. We're talking about addiction. Now let's talk about this for a second as well. And some people, this may be a little difficult for y'all to digest, but hear me out. In the throes of addiction, a person is unpredictable. And even as he made that video, shortly thereafter, he would be picked up in a Manhattan hotel by the feds. The feds would raid his room, and the feds would find 2C, ecstasy, and other pills in his possession. Diddy was still getting high when he got picked up. Which causes me to question for those of y'all screaming free Diddy, are y'all saying free Diddy so that he can get help? Or are y'all saying free Diddy because y'all want to re-victimize these victims? Because y'all are so anti-female that you don't want to accept that this man has even accepted that he's done some horrific things. And that's not an excuse. He does have to want the help for himself. That's not true all the time, LC. And if people are treating him like a celebrity and people are catering to his every whim and he's, you know what I'm saying? Is he really being rehabilitated? Is he going to drug treatment? Because how is he in drug treatment right now when he's sitting in a Manhattan court every day for trial? He's not there during the day for treatment, for therapy. He's not there to receive that help because he's in court. He's in court. Yeah, he wanted to stay at the court until 10 p.m. so that he could talk to his lawyers. Now, I understand that the defense is getting ready to start bringing their witnesses up. And I'm interested to see who's going to actually testify for it. You guys, I've been on here for like 3 hours. I've been on here for like 3 hours. We talked about the defense coming to try to do another mistrial. We talked about the pattern. We talked about the 35 predicate offenses of RICO. We've talked about Dr. Dawn Hughes. We talked about a lot of stuff in these 3 hours. I've read transcript to you guys. I've done a lot. So with that being said, you guys, thank y'all for tapping in and tuning in with your girl. I know that certain parts of things start losing people, but you know, those who want to hear are here, and those who can't take it ain't. So it is what it is. But y'all, thank y'all for tapping in and tuning in with your girl. I love y'all so very much. Please make sure that your notifications are on. If you're new here, welcome to the bar. But make sure that y'all also tap into my other video, because I recorded this video. We have this video going on the vertical, and then we also have the horizontal live, the regular live. So on the regular live is where you will be able to actually see the court docs for yourself. You guys can go back and y'all can pause. You can read for yourself what the documents say and all of that. Thank you so much for the gifts that y'all are giving me. Thank you so much for every like, for every comment, for every interaction. Welcome to all of the new people that may have subscribed to the channel. I don't know if there's new people. I think there are. Yes, there's definitely some new people that have come to the bar. So welcome to the bar. Okay? Welcome to the bar. But be sure that y'all tap into every live, because not every live is going to be a vertical live. Thank y'all so much. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday, and I will see y'all in the next video. Peace, everybody. See y'all later.